Black Waitress sees her childhood photo in Millionaire's house. She is shocked to discover she was the daughter he lost 20 years ago. "My God, it's me." The words came out as a whisper from Ava's lips as she stared at the golden frame hanging in the private hallway of the Harrington mansion. Her fingers trembled, almost dropping the crystal tray she was carrying as a buried memory of a woman's gentle lullaby clawed at her heart. There, framed like a precious relic, was a photo of her at age 5. The same shy smile, the same unruly curls, even the little pink dress she vaguely remembered wearing that now felt like a ghost clinging to her skin. But how on earth did her childhood photo end up decorating the wall of one of New York's wealthiest families? Ava Thompson, 25, had served champagne at dozens of high society events, but she never expected to find pieces of her lost past in a mansion where it cost more than $2,000 to step on the marble floor, a world that mocked her existence with its opulence. Raised in foster homes since she was a baby, she always knew there were gaps in her history. Social workers spoke vaguely of difficult circumstances and documents lost in a fire, but her nightmares whispered of a man's cold eyes turning away from her cries. But never in her worst nightmares did she imagine that the answer was hanging on the wall of Edward Harrington, the same man who half an hour earlier had walked past her as if she were invisible, his indifference slicing through her like a blade. "Hey you, what are you doing here?" The security guard's harsh voice brought her back to reality. "Employees are not allowed in the private wings." "Sorry, I got lost looking for the bathroom," Ava lied, forcing a smile as her heart raced with the weight of a truth she wasn't ready to face. She memorized every detail of that photo before walking away. Back in the main hall, her eyes automatically searched for Edward Harrington among the guests. There he was, impeccable in his tailored tuxedo, talking about his charitable foundation for underprivileged children, while the millionaires in attendance applauded his generosity, each clap a mockery of her stolen childhood. What cruel irony. The man who talked about helping abandoned children had a photo of his own abandoned daughter decorating his home like a secret trophy, a perverse monument to his lies. Ava watched Edward's every gesture, every word, every calculated smile. There was something in his eyes when he spoke of second chances and broken families, a thinly veiled guilt that she recognized immediately as the shadow of a man who'd traded her life for wealth. When Edward casually mentioned the personal tragedy that motivated him to help other families, Ava felt her blood run cold. Personal tragedy. She hadn't died. She had been abandoned, discarded like a pawn in his ruthless game. "Life sometimes forces us to make impossible decisions," Edward continued, his voice heavy with rehearsed emotion that rang hollow in her ears, a performance perfected over decades. Losing a daughter changes a man forever, losing or discarding. In that moment, as she watched the man, who was probably her biological father, receive congratulations for his courage to turn his pain into purpose, Ava made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She was going to find out the whole truth. And when she did, Edward Harrington was going to pay dearly for every lie he had told, every tear she had shed, every night she had spent wondering why she wasn't good enough to be loved, a debt she'd collect with unrelenting fury. But while everyone applauded the philanthropist of the year, no one noticed the smile that formed at the corner of Ava's mouth. It wasn't the smile of a daughter finding her lost father. It was the smile of someone who had just discovered their enemy's weak spot, a crack in his armor she'd exploit until his world collapsed. If you feel like this story goes way beyond a simple family reunion, you're right. Subscribe to the channel because what Ava was about to discover about Edward Harrington would make his philanthropy seem like a joke compared to the revenge she had in mind. 3 weeks after the event, Ava couldn't get that photo out of her head. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the innocent smile of the child she once was, hanging as a decoration in the home of the man who should have protected her, a taunting reminder of the love she'd been denied. She needed answers. But where to start? Edward Harrington was untouchable. President of a global tech firm, board member of 3 universities, and ironically, patron of orphanages across the state. The man had built an empire on his own hypocrisy, a fortress of lies she was determined to dismantle brick by brick. That's when she remembered Leo, the veteran bartender who worked at all of New York's elite events. If anyone knew the dirty secrets of those people, it was him, Harrington. Leo almost choked on his coffee when Ava mentioned the name. Girl, you don't want to mess with that man. He has tentacles everywhere, a predator cloaked in charity. Why do you say that? Ava asked, pretending to be casual as she wiped the glasses, her hands trembling with the weight of her quest. Leo looked around, making sure they were alone in the service area. There are rumors, old ones, about a daughter he had who just disappeared off the map. His wife died in a suspicious accident when the girl was about 5 years old. The age in the photo, a number that now felt like a brand on her soul. The strange thing is that after the accident, Harrington inherited an astronomical fortune from his wife's life insurance. And the girl, she was never heard from again. It's as if she evaporated, erased, to fuel his ascent. But he talks so much about helping orphan children. Leo laughed bitterly. Of course he does. Nothing better to clean a dirty conscience than a charitable foundation with his name stamped in gold letters. A facade to mask his monstrous greed. That night, Ava created fake profiles on social media and began investigating. She discovered that Edward had married 3 times after the death of his first wife, always to much younger women who signed strict prenuptial agreements. All of his subsequent marriages had lasted no more than 2 years. Even more interesting, she found old articles about Clara Harrington, her biological mother. The woman had been a children's rights activist, fighting to reform the adoption system. Her fierce words in a faded interview haunting Ava. Every child deserves a voice. The last article about her mentioned that she was investigating irregularities at private adoption agencies 2 weeks before she died. How convenient. Ava printed everything she found and organized a timeline. Each piece a shard of her shattered past she'd wield as a weapon. Clara had discovered something compromising about adoption agencies. 2 weeks later, she died in an accident. Edward inherited everything, and his daughter mysteriously disappeared. She needed more information, and she knew exactly where to get it. Alina Martinez, a retired private investigator who frequented the cafe where she worked in the mornings. Elena, I need a favor, Ava said, pouring the extra strong cappuccino the woman always ordered, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. From the sound of it, I'm guessing it's not a small one. I need information on someone important. Elena studied Ava's face for a long moment. At 65, she had developed a keen instinct for recognizing when someone was desperate for justice, and Ava's eyes burned with a righteous fire. How much can you pay? I can work for you, cleaning, organizing, whatever you need. Interesting, Elena smiled. It's been a while since I've had a real case. Tell me everything. As Ava told her story, Elena took notes in a worn notebook, her pen pausing as Ava's voice cracked with suppressed grief. When she finished, the investigator looked at her with respect. Sweetheart, you're not just looking for your father. You're hunting a predator who may have killed your mother. Over the next few days, Elena began digging. What she discovered was even worse than they had imagined. Edward hadn't just abandoned Ava, he had forged documents declaring her dead in the same accident that killed Clara. Look at this. Elena showed her the printed papers. A fake death certificate, a statement that the body was never found. Your father received life insurance money for you too. Ava felt nauseous. He profited from my supposed death. $750,000, 0 cents, a sum that branded her existence with a price tag of betrayal. And he didn't stop there. He used the tragedy to create the charitable foundation. His entire image as a man who overcame grief through charity was built on the lie of your death. Elena continued leafing through the documents. There's more. Clara had hired a private investigator 2 weeks before she died. She suspected Edward was selling children through an illegal adoption ring. The investigator disappeared shortly after she did. His last report a chilling warning. Harrington's power is lethal. It was then that Ava realized Edward's cruel genius. He hadn't just gotten rid of an unwanted daughter and an inconvenient wife. He had turned their double murder into social and financial capital, a macabre alchemy that turned her pain into his profit. "There's something else," Helena said, handing her a blurry photo. "Clara didn't die in the accident. She died 2 hours later in the hospital, fully conscious, and before she died, she said something to the nurse about protecting the girl from the monster. Her final words, a desperate plea etched in Ava's heart, 'Save my daughter from him.'" Ava felt tears burn her eyes. Her mother had died knowing her daughter was in danger, but if Edward thought she was a dead girl and buried, he was about to find out that some ghosts come back to haunt you. Elena handed her a folder filled with documents. "Everything you need is here. But Ava, this man is dangerous. If he killed your mother to get the inheritance—" "He won't hurt me," Ava replied with a calmness that surprised even herself, her resolve forged in the fire of her mother's sacrifice. "Because he doesn't know I exist, and that would be her greatest advantage." While Edward Harrington continued his life as a lying philanthropist, believing that all his secrets were buried with a daughter who never died, Ava planned the most dramatic reunion of his life, each detail of her plan a step toward shattering his illusion of invincibility. She had already decided how she would do it at his foundation's next charity event, ironically a gala for orphan children. Edward Harrington would discover that death sometimes has a very particular way of collecting its debts, and Ava would be the collector, armed with truth as her weapon. The question hanging in the air was simple. What happens when a man who profited from his daughter's supposed death discovers that she is not only alive, but knows everything? The answer would come soon, and it would be more devastating than Edward could ever imagine. The Harrington Foundation's annual gala for orphan children was in full swing. Edward was on stage talking about second chances and the transformative power of a father's love, while the millionaire guests applauded his inspiring generosity, their adulation a bitter pill. Ava swallowed with a smile. Ava, dressed as a caterer, circulated the room with a tray of champagne and a smile that hid 20 years of pent-up anger, each step a calculated move in her chess game of vengeance. Today, Edward Harrington would finally meet his daughter. "Ladies and gentlemen," Edward continued his rehearsed speech, "as someone who tragically lost a daughter, I know the pain these children carry. That's why our foundation—" That's when Ava approached the stage and took the microphone from an assistant. "Excuse me, Mr. Harrington, can I ask you a question?" The silence cut through the air like a knife. Edward looked at her with ill-concealed irritation, a flash of unease in his eyes as if he sensed the storm approaching. "Miss, shouldn't you be serving drinks?" "Of course. But as the daughter of orphans, your speech touched me deeply." Ava stepped onto the stage, ignoring the murmurs from the audience, her heart pounding with the thrill of confronting her tormentor. "Especially when you said you lost a daughter. Can you tell us more about that?" Edward forced a smile. "Well, it was a personal tragedy. I'd rather not go into details." "That's a shame." Ava turned on the microphone, "Because I have some very interesting details about your lost daughter." Edward's expression changed instantly. His eyes narrowed as he studied Ava's face. For the first time he really saw her, and a flicker of dread crossed his features, as if he glimpsed his own downfall. "First, she didn't die in an accident. Second, you abandoned her after killing her mother so you could get her inheritance. Third," Ava smiled, a cold, triumphant curve of her lips, "she's right here in front of you, and she has some questions for Daddy." The blood drained from Edward's face. "You can't be Ava Clara Thompson, or rather, Ava Clara Harrington, your daughter, whom you declared dead to collect $750,000, 0 cents, in life insurance." The audience exploded in murmurs. Edward tried to grab the microphone, but Ava stepped away, her movements swift, fueled by years of suppressed rage. "Ladies and gentlemen, how about we get to know the real Edward Harrington?" Ava pulled out a thick envelope. "Here are the fake death certificates he created for me and my mother. Here are the life insurance receipts he received for our deaths. And here," she held up an enlarged photo, "is Clara Harrington's autopsy report, showing that she didn't die in the accident. She was poisoned 2 hours earlier. The toxicology report a damning truth that silenced the room." Edward staggered. That's absurd slander." "Is it?" Ava pointed to the large screen behind the stage. Then explain to me why you have my childhood photo hanging in your private office. The photo appeared on the screen, the same one Ava had secretly photographed in the mansion, but now everyone could see the inscription on the back. To the most amazing dad in the world. I love you, Ava. The audience fell silent. 20 years, Edward. Ava turned to him. 20 years I grew up thinking I was worthless, that my parents had died and abandoned me, while you paraded your fake grief to amass a fortune. Meanwhile, you used our tragedy to build your image as a philanthropist, making millions in donations that never reached the real children. Elena appeared at the side of the stage, signaling that she was recording everything. But you know what's even funnier? Ava laughed. You hired me to serve champagne at the gala for the foundation you created on the back of our fake deaths. What a cruel irony, isn't it? Edward tried to recover. You have no real proof of any of this. I don't. Ava smiled, her eyes gleaming with the certainty of victory. Press people. Did you get the files I emailed you 5 minutes ago, including the recordings of Edward admitting to his lawyer that he got rid of the problem of his wife and daughter? The audio played, Edward's chilling confession. Clara had to go and the girl was collateral, echoing like a death knell. The journalist's cameras began flashing wildly. Edward looked around, watching his reputation crumble in real time. You, he whispered, finally understanding the extent of the trap, his voice a broken plea against her unyielding resolve. You planned all of this. Of course I did. You taught me that revenge is best served cold. And Dad, Ava savored the word, letting it drip with venom, 20 years is a long time to cool. The audience began to rise and leave, many calling to cancel their donations. Edward stood on stage alone, watching his entire life crumble, as his dead daughter looked at him with the same coldness he had shown her 2 decades earlier. Oh, and Edward, Ava stepped down from the stage. You'll be thrilled to know that the FBI is on its way to arrest you for insurance fraud, murder, and money laundering. They said, my evidence is more than sufficient. As the sirens began to wail outside, Edward Harrington finally understood that he had seriously underestimated the daughter he thought he had buried forever. But as the handcuffs closed around his wrists, one question hung in the air after 20 years of lies, betrayal, and revenge, executed with surgical precision. Was it possible that a family destroyed by greed could find some kind of redemption? Or are some wounds too deep to heal even when justice finally prevails? 6 months after Edward Harrington's arrest, Ava sat in the office that had once belonged to the man who had tried to erase her existence. The plaque on the door now read, Clara Harrington Foundation Executive Director, Ava Thompson, a title that felt like a crown forged from her mother's courage. The FBI had frozen all of Edward's assets after discovering that only 12% of the foundation's donations actually reached the orphan children. The rest financed the luxurious lifestyle of a man who had built his empire on corpses and lies. Ironic, isn't it? Commented Elena, now her official assistant, leafing through the financial reports. He used her death to raise millions, and now you're using those same millions to do the work he pretended to do. Ava smiled as she signed a check for the construction of the 5th new orphanage, each stroke of her pen a tribute to Clara's unyielding spirit. The money confiscated from Edward would be used for exactly what he had always promised, but this time for real. The transformation in Ava's life had been radical and public. The caterer who served champagne to the elite was now on the cover of national magazines, such as The Daughter Who Came Back from the Dead to Seek Justice. And Time magazine had named her one of the 30 most influential people of the year, her face a symbol of triumph over a past that tried to bury her. TV shows were vying for exclusive interviews about how she had exposed one of the biggest charity fraud schemes in the country. You've become more famous than he is, laughed Leo, the former bartender who now worked as the new foundation's event coordinator. Edward Harrington spent decades building a reputation and you destroyed it in 20 minutes. And what a destruction it had been. News about Edward came regularly from the prison system, each piece more devastating than the last. His former associates had filed lawsuits to recover the $9,500,000, 0 cents, they had invested in the fraudulent foundation, His 3 ex-wives had broken their confidentiality agreements and were publishing tell books: Married to a Monster, Life with a Psychopath, and How I Escaped a Killer. The exclusive golf club where he played had removed his honorary member plaque and renamed the annual tournament that bore his name. The university had removed his honor from the library building. Even the church he attended asked him not to return after his release. More importantly, Ava had found her real family. During her investigations, she discovered that Clara had a sister, Laura, who had searched for Ava for years before giving up, believing her niece was truly dead. "You have her eyes," had said at their first meeting, holding up an old photo of Clara, her voice trembling with the joy of reclaiming a lost piece of her sister. "Your mother would be so proud to see who you've become." Laura had become more than an aunt. She was the family Ava never knew she had. Together, they had created a complete file on Clara, documenting her work as an activist and her fight for children's rights, each page a testament to a woman who died to protect her daughter. The investigation Clara had begun into corrupt adoption agencies was now being conducted by the FBI, resulting in 47 arrests and the closure of 12 illegal agencies. Clara didn't die in vain, Laura said during one of the many nights they spent organizing her sister's documents. She planted seeds that you've made blossom into an entire forest. Edward, meanwhile, faced a very different reality. Sentenced to 25 years in prison for murder, fraud, and money laundering, he had lost not only his freedom, but also his entire fortune, which had been confiscated for reparations. His high society friends had vanished into thin air, and his reputation was irrevocably destroyed. The letters he tried to send to Ava always came back unanswered. In one of them, which Elena had intercepted, he wrote, "I was young and stupid when this happened. If you really are my daughter, please forgive me. I can explain everything." Ava had torn up the letter without finishing it, the scraps a symbol of her refusal to let his words taint her victory. Forgiveness was a luxury that murderers did not deserve. But the true measure of Ava's success was not in the headlines or financial reports. It was in the 847 letters she received each month from children whose lives had been transformed by the new foundation. "Ava, I got a scholarship to study medicine at Harvard," wrote 16-year-old Amanda. "Thank you for teaching me that our past does not have to define our future. You inspired me to become a lawyer," said another letter from a 14-year-old boy. "I want to defend children like you defended your mother. Thanks to the foundation, our family is finally reunited after 8 years apart," wrote a mother. "My children are home." In an interview on CNN 6 months after Edward's arrest, Anderson Cooper asked Ava if she felt anger toward her biological father. She thought carefully before answering, "Anger is a luxury I can't afford. Edward Harrington taught me, unintentionally, the most valuable lesson of my life, that our origins don't define our destiny. He tried to erase me from history, but he only gave me a blank page to write my own story, a story I've written in the name of every child he betrayed." The program showed impressive images of the new foundation in operation: 5 modern orphanages, 200 children receiving quality education, 89 families reunited, 156 young people receiving college scholarships, all funded by money Edward had stolen, thinking he would never be found out. "The difference between us," Ava continued, "is that he used a tragedy to benefit himself. I used a tragedy to benefit others. He built an empire of lies. I built a legacy of truth." The last scene of the program showed Ava visiting Clara's grave for the first time. She had had a new pink marble headstone made, replacing the simple plaque that read only Clara Harrington, 1975 to 2003, with a more complete message: Clara Harrington, mother, activist, heroine. She fought for those who had no voice. Her daughter had completed the mission. "We did it, Mom," Ava whispered, leaving a bouquet of white roses, her tears a quiet vow to carry Clara's fight forever. "The justice you sought has finally come. And you know what's best? It came through the daughter he'd tried to erase, but whom you raised to be indestructible." As she left the cemetery, her cell phone buzzed with a notification that made her smile. It was an alert that the foundation had broken another record. More money raised in 1 week than Edward had actually donated in his entire career as a philanthropist. That night, alone in her new apartment with a panoramic view of New York, Ava reflected on her journey. From an invisible caterer serving champagne to those who despised her, she had become the voice of thousands of children who, like her, had been abandoned by the system. The phone rang. It was Laura, her aunt, calling as she did every night. "How was your day, dear?" "Transformative," Ava replied, looking out the window at the city that now knew her as a heroine, her reflection a mirror of Clara's strength. 50 more children were adopted today through our program. How about you? I finished organizing Clara's journals. We're going to publish a book about her work, a legacy that will outlive the man who tried to silence her. Eva smiled. Even in death, her mother was still saving lives. The best revenge hadn't been destroying Edward Harrington, though that had been incredibly satisfying. The best revenge had been becoming everything he pretended to be, multiplied by 1,000, while he rotted in a cell, watching the news reports of how his dead daughter was building the legacy he had faked for decades, a legacy that turned his lies into light for those he'd left in darkness. Edward had tried to erase Ava from history, but she hadn't just rewritten her own narrative. She had turned her pain into fuel to light the way for thousands of other children. Today, while Edward counts the days in a cold cell, waking to the clang of bars and sleeping on concrete, Ava wakes every day in Egyptian silk, knowing she's living the life her mother dreamed for her. And that is a victory that no prison, no lie, no betrayal can take away. If this story of justice, family, and transformation touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that sometimes the most unlikely endings are exactly the ones we need to hear. Because true victory isn't just about surviving the storm. It's about becoming the lightning that transforms your survival into light for those still lost in the darkness.